Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. Curtis Sittenfeld is the author of Romantic Comedy, a novel. And I have to say, Curtis was on my list of wish list when I started this podcast 5 years ago. And I am just so excited I got to interview her, and she is just as lovely and delightful as I expected. And I was just really happy about the whole thing. So enjoy. Curtis Sittenfeld is the New York Times bestselling author of 6 novels, including Rodham, Eligible, Prep, American Wife, and Sisterland, as well as the collection You Think It, I'll Say It. Her novels have been translated into 30 languages. In addition, her short stories have appeared in The New Yorker, The Washington Post Magazine, Esquire, and the Best American Short Stories, for which she has also been the guest editor. Her nonfiction has appeared in The New York Times, The Atlantic, Time, and Vanity Fair, and on public radio's This American Life. Her 7th novel, Romantic Comedy, is out now. Welcome, Curtis. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Romantic Comedy, your latest novel.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Okay, romantic comedy, so fun. I inhaled it basically in one sitting. I never knew how much I wanted to know about a place like Saturday Night Live until I started learning more, and then could not get enough. So why don't you start by just telling listeners a little bit about the inspiration for the book and kind of what it's about? Or I can summarize if you don't feel like answering.
I can answer. So my family started watching a lot of Saturday Night Live during the pandemic. And I thought to myself, someone should write a screenplay for a romantic comedy where a writer for a show, a female writer for a show like SNL, writes about the phenomenon of talented but ordinary looking men from the show dating super gorgeous, super talented, super famous female celebrities, and how the dating up thing happens for men but not for women. And then there'll be a host, and she, maybe this theory is disproven. And then a few months passed, and I thought, oh, maybe that screenplay that someone should write, maybe that should be a novel, and maybe that someone should be me. And then I wrote it.
I'm always like, someone should do this, someone should do that. I'm like, well, who is the someone half the time, right?
I know. I think it about changing rolls of toilet paper. I think someone should change that roll of toilet paper. And then I think, oh, actually I should replace the empty roll. But this time it was more fun.
Novels as compared to toilet paper rolls. Yeah, for the first time. Here we go. And I know you mentioned in your acknowledgments that you were watching so much Saturday Night Live. So have you been a fan forever? And do you remember watching it as a kid? When did you start?
Yes and yes. So in the book, the main character, Sally, tells her love interest, Noah, that she and the fictional show, The Night Owls, are the same age. And they were both born in 1981. And in real life, SNL and I were both born in 1975. So obviously I did not start watching it as a baby. I think I was 10, and my friend Annie's older brothers introduced me. And it was the kind of era of Dana Carvey church lady type thing and I think when you're that age, you often don't even know exactly what the joke or the punchline is, or you don't know the original thing it's mocking, but you're like, oh, this is so fun and interesting. And, I want to know more. And so, I watched off and on, I watched in high school and college when I had kids. I didn't really watch. I think I sort of tuned in for Tina Fey and Amy Poehler and Maya Rudolph. And then I've definitely pretty comprehensively watched at least the last 5 years. Like I don't watch it on Saturday night. My family watches it at like 7 p.m. on Sunday night.
That is smart. I know now it's like you don't have to stay up. It used to be,
I know.
I was always up or I was out in college. And of course, there we would catch the end. And now I'm like, oh, I can't stay up for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, not at all. But it's also interesting because so many people, especially I think people who are in their 20s now, or people who live in other countries, might have seen viral sketches, but they actually haven't seen it in its entirety. And it has such a fixed structure that there's something really pleasing where you're like, oh, it's Weekend Update. Oh, it's the first musical act. It's the second musical act. And I like it in its entirety.
Totally. And the predictability of it all. It's so much changes, and yet we can go back to something.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the world changes, the focus of the sketches changes. The sketches themselves, because they're live, there is always unpredictability. And then that intersects with the consistency of the structure in this way that I think is like really satisfying.
Totally. So tell me about the research needed. So you decided someone should write this book. Then you realized that someone should be you. And then what happened?
So actually doing the research made me realize that like, I feel like this is very immodest to say that writing this book was a great idea because it was so fun to do the research. Like I like doing research for fiction anyway, but it was especially because, I started writing this in the summer of 2021 and I actually set aside a sort of more dark, serious book. And to live in this world where it was like work for me to listen to comedians on podcasts interview one another. There's tons of, comedian whether it's like Mark Maron, WTF, or like Mike Birbiglia, or there's like Fly on the Wall, which is actually Dana Carvey and David Spade interviewing tons of people from SNL. I read memoirs by people who've, current and former cast members. There's like a SNL YouTube, almost like digital shorts that describe the way the different departments work, like the makeup department or wardrobe. So it was just like, it was a total joy to exist in that world. And it was so much fun and such a good kind of counterbalance to the pandemic.
And then did you get to go watch in person? Like how many times did you go?
So, okay.
I'm just curious. It's like not even related to the book. I'm just like, tell me about this experience.
No. Actually, well, it's funny because a few people have been like, oh, did you work for SNL? And I'm so flattered. I'm like in my dreams. I've like, barely been in the studio once. So I was almost finished writing and I went to a dress rehearsal, which is right before the live show. And it's actually a little longer because they end up cutting a few sketches. And I was in like full research nerd mode. I was by myself. I like got the ticket at the last minute. I live in Minneapolis. I like flew by myself for 17 hours to New York and like went through. So I was kind of like also like a little nervous, like, did I get anything wrong? Like it wasn't, I think a lot of people probably go and it's like, you have some drinks with your friends. You go, have you ever been?
I haven't. And I've always wanted to. And I had some friends who like knew someone and they used to go to the after parties a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's so funny too. Cause I feel like I know people who've been to after parties, but I have not been within 10 miles of an after party.
I'm more likely to be awake the next day when the after party is starting. Like,
oh my God. I feel like if I'm awake during an after party, it's like I'm lying in my bed, having woken up after being asleep for like 5 hours, having like an anxiety attack. Like I'm not at an after party.
Yeah, this is when I'm up like reading because I'm so like stressed out I can't sleep again.
Yeah.
Not the party, not the partying. That's so awesome. So wait, talk about the whole, what it was, Danny Horst. Danny Horst effect. And when you really like delved into it, this whole notion of sort of dating up attraction wise and between men and women or vice versa or whatever, like after you spent a lot of time on that, where did you come out on it in general?
Well, so everyone knows what I'm talking about. Obviously it's a real phenomenon at SNL where again, these people are very talented. Colin Jost is married to Scarlett Johansson. Colin Jost is super smart, super talented. I think he's very attractive. Scarlett Johansson is like a household name. I mean, she's a true movie star. Or, of course, Pete Davidson, whether it's Ariana Grande or Kim Kardashian, or obviously he's dated many people that he did not meet directly through SNL. So there is this phenomenon of you essentially, it's extraordinarily unusual to see a woman dating a very attractive male celebrity unless the woman herself looks like a model, no matter what her profession is. I mean, I think for me, like the weird thing about spending so much of my professional kind of energy analyzing this was that the conclusion I came to, like I actually thought, okay, if I were Scarlett Johansson, I would totally want to be married to Colin Jost. Or like if I were Kim Kardashian, like, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't I want to date Pete Davidson? It's actually kind of the depressing part is that it doesn't work in the opposite direction. It's not that it's weird that it works one way. It's that it's a bummer that it doesn't work the other way. The exception that isn't an exception that proves the rule is kind of Keanu Reeves, who dates this woman, Alexandra Grant, who appears to have naturally like whitish gray hair, which makes people just like lose their shit. I don't know. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
We are now. Yeah, no, yes, we are.
It makes people lose their minds. Okay, she's like very attractive, very successful, like has a PhD, is an accomplished artist. I think is like 6 to 8 years younger than he is. So it's like, it's so weird that people are like, she's almost like a normal woman. It's like, depends on your definition of normal, but I was like, this is cause for celebration. She doesn't dye her hair. So it just, I mean, again, you can hardly think of examples of like women very visibly dating up. But again, it's also a little delicate to talk about because I mean, I don't think I would ever by name insult someone's appearance. Well, I hope I would. I wouldn't on the record. No, anyway, but it is a weird, so it's like, or like people, there are some examples where people kind of say like, oh, she's his beard or whatever, but we don't need to go down that.
No. Okay. We'll stop. I'll pivot the conversation before you get in trouble here. Oh my goodness. So I was surprised to find a whole epistolary section in the middle of the book. Tell me about that decision.
So it's funny. When I conceived of this novel, like, and again, I was like, I wanted to be short and fun and fizzy and, kind of like doubly fun. Like I wanted to be the fun of romance and falling in love and the fun of SNL and like mash those up. And I thought it's going to be 90 pages. It's ultimately 300 pages, but I very clearly thought like, I want the characters to kind of meet and have a connection, and then things kind of go off the rails, and then they email each other and get to know each other in this totally different way. And it was super fun to me. And I think both my American editor and my British editor, who are incredibly like smart and kind and supportive, they were both a little like, really, like an all email section, like, that's interesting. And I do think that a few people are sort of skeptical, and then sometimes people are skeptical and are like, man, like I that was my least favorite section, but a lot of people are like, oh, that was actually my favorite, because you kind of get this direct window into the characters that's not even, I mean, of course it's really filtered by me, the writer, but it doesn't feel like it. Like it's not them in a scene, it's them speaking for themselves. And I also thought it was fun that the reader has to kind of make the same decisions that the characters make. Like, was that a flirty comment or not a flirty comment? Or, they're not interacting, so they don't have any additional information.
I loved that section. I'll just say that.
Thank you.
I mean, I guess I don't know that I would feel comfortable saying I didn't, but I happen to love it, which is why I brought it up. I love like even whole books. Like, have you read Love and Saffron by Kim Fay? It's like all letters.
What year is it from?
It was published in the last 2 years, maybe last year, 2 years ago.
Oh, I'll definitely look it up.
I mean, it's not related to your book at all, but it's all letters back and forth, and it takes place further back in time. But I don't know. I mean, just in recent times, I feel like there are less and less letters or emails, or that form is sort of dying down as like communication is so rampant. It's like we all read emails all day. Why put it in a book? But I still think it's such a Yeah, such an immediacy to it. There's such an immediacy to it.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to stop reading other people's emails. I mean, that's what's so delicious about it, right? It's like, oh, wait, I get to read all of this.
Yeah, you're allowed, you're supposed to. Not only are you like allowed to, but like, yeah, you have to get to the next section.
Yeah. I know, now that we're out of the pandemic or whatever you want to call this phase of life, going back into it through the letters and what they were going through, sometimes people are going back before the pandemic and like, oh no, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to set it before. And like, you've chosen to set it right during the middle, and that's what kept them apart and all this. I hope I'm not that's not giving anything away.
No. That's okay.
And people know it's like not a spoiler that the pandemic happened, but it happened in your book. Was that the natural way to separate them, or like, was it a good device? Just tell me about that decision as I ramble.
I think partly, I'm sure you'll have this conversation over and over with so many writers in the years to come. Like it's sort of like the pandemic happened. It's a part of reality. If you write realistic fiction set in 2020 or after, you either very deliberately like are writing a kind of parallel universe, or you have to kind of acknowledge it somehow. And I think that different writers will make different choices about what to do. But partly, I think I included it because of when I was writing. So I started it in 2021. I could have set the whole book before, from 2014 to 2018. But I think there were two things. One, I do think it made people kind of reevaluate their priorities in some cases. And the pandemic relationship is a real thing. Like there are definitely people who I think got together, whether it was long distance or local, or like, I've been thinking of you for years or whatever. And then I think also that just like the circumstances of my characters' lives changed in this way, that even though the pandemic was this terrible thing, they sort of find each other again in a way I don't think they would have otherwise.
Love it. You also included, and I know you mentioned you had lost a parent, and there's parent loss in this book, and even the relationship between a step parent when your uniting force is no longer there. And I feel like you did such a good job with that too, because there is this, I have a stepfather and a stepmother, and, my love for them is so like, usually they come on the phone after, like it's always the linchpin is the other person. So what happens when the supporting beam of the relationship gets sort of knocked away? It was such an interesting exploration of that particular relationship.
Thank you. Yeah. It's obviously like the pandemic is really painful. And I think a lot of comedy comes from pain. Like a lot of comedians, I think they're so funny, and I think they have, sort of pain in their upbringing, or maybe they have mental health challenges or something. Like it feels very not unusual. And so even though this is, I think, essentially a light, fun story, it does acknowledge that the pandemic exists. It does acknowledge that. It's almost like, how can anyone be an adult and not have been through like painful experiences? And I think the book does acknowledge that.
Yeah. I was posting something the other day, and I was like, who has not had something bad happen by, like, I'm 40, I'm a year younger or something, but who hasn't had something bad happen by now? Right. It's this is life. So we might as well all just sort of face up to it. But you said that you put aside a darker other novel. Are you going back to it? And tell me about that one.
Well, I'm trying to figure it out. So, what really happened was there was this book that I think I probably started writing in the summer of 2020. But my book Rodham, which is this, alternate retelling of Hillary Clinton's life, had come out in April 2020. And I felt, actually maybe May, anyway, I felt like very proud of it. And I felt like I had put a lot of myself into it. And I also kind of felt like I was ready to pivot. So people, if I was having a conversation like this, people would say, what are you going to do next? And I would say, I want to write a book that's short and fun. And I worked on a book, and then was like, for like 8 months, was like, this is not short and also not fun. I think it's interesting and has sort of elements of like anthropology. And so I'm actually trying to decide now if I should go back to it. But I have this theory that if you're going to kind of go away from your own incomplete writing project, like story or novel or whatever, for like, whether it's for like days or weeks or months, it's easiest to re-enter, the cleanest it is when you re-enter. So if you like it's almost like better to spend a few days polishing it, so it's not this kind of like impenetrable jungle of like markups and whatever. And I did not do that with the book. So it would be, I almost would maybe start over and just borrow the original plot or something. But I'm so lucky that I get to like decide the fictional world I live in. And I want to be careful what I choose.
Of course. Wow. How long did this book take, and what does it look like when you're writing? Like, where do you write? Like,
in this like really super plain tiny office. Yes, I do. So actually this book took me about a year, a little bit less. The funny thing is, because of COVID, it was, I like started it right around the time. Do you remember when like it seemed like we'll get vaccines and then we'll be protected? And then there was like in the summer of 2021, it was like, on Cape Cod, like there were all these breakthrough infections, and rates were particularly high where I live. And I didn't travel and didn't socialize very much for like almost an entire year. Like I once went to visit my mom, but actually an interesting part of that is like under normal circumstances. I mean, I feel like all our lives are so like nitty gritty logistics, but like under normal circumstances, if I were to go, visit a university and like talk about my book, it would be like, I would travel there and then I'd be there and then I would travel home and then I would like have all my dirty laundry or whatever. And so I'm just like kind of, and it's nice to be around other humans, but I'm interrupting myself. And so I was the most focused. Like I didn't interrupt myself to travel. So I was writing almost every day, and I didn't interrupt myself, which I also sometimes do. I like, I'm like, oh, I'll just write a quick short story or something, because I think I get bored with my novel. But I think because this subject of this novel was so fun, and it was almost like going to SNL every day, that I was like, oh, I want to go back to that.
That's so great. So you could just like powered your way through it.
Yeah. Like it was a pleasure, and it always sort of welcomed me back. Like I don't think I ever had the experience of like, oh my God, who made this huge mess? Like, and how do I get back inside it?
I love that. Did you ever feel after the success of Prep, like all this pressure to do it again, or that it was like only going to happen once, or like, did you ever feel any of that?
I did wonder if I would only have a very successful book once. So, Prep came out in 2005, and especially after my second book came out, which some people don't even know exists, but it's called The Man of My Dreams, I did still only have one very successful book. And then my third book was American Wife, and that was like essentially successful again. This is an interesting question that there's like a lot of ways to answer. On the one hand, like I read my reviews, I'm not like, I won't pretend that I don't care what anyone thinks of my writing, except for me. Like I do care. And like I do, there's some criticism that really stings, and then there's some that I don't care. I actually don't care about. It depends kind of on the source. But one thing is that actually I've been extraordinarily privileged in the sense that my books have always gotten attention, but they've always gotten mixed reviews. It's not like this unanimous love fest. And I've always been like a writer during the time that people can kind of seek you out online and say super nasty things. Or if you have bad willpower, which I sometimes do, you can seek out the nasty things that people are saying about you. So it's never felt like this pure love fest. Like, it's not like I won the Pulitzer or something when I was 30 or at any other point. So like, even though I don't know if other people realize how, like, I'll always get a few scathingly bad reviews that it just feels like someone was like licking their chops, like having the best time. And sometimes it's like a talented writer who uses their writing talent to like mock me. But also, I just think like being a writer, it's kind of a quiet identity to have. Like if I were like a fourth tier reality show contestant or whatever, I would have so much more recognition than I have as a writer. So I don't know. I mean, I think what you're asking is like, it's like I could have like many sessions of therapy about this, but I think I'm able to kind of keep it in perspective overall.
Do you see, I feel like it's so upside down that writers are not identified on the street and photographed pumping gas and doing all that stuff. No, seriously, like in my dream world, that's what it would be, because I care so much more about authors than I do about reality show. Well, some reality show people are great. All to say, I feel like it's all skewed. But then some people say that maybe writers don't want that attention.
Oh, no. I would not want that. I would not want to be. Yeah. I mean, first of all, because I think that, especially if you're a writer, you probably want to be observing other people. You don't want other people to be observing you. So no, I don't wish that I had people approach. I mean, people like probably like maybe 3 times a year, someone will approach me and say like, "Oh, are you Curtis?" or whatever. But actually the funny thing is, much more often I'll like meet someone and then like, you know, like say I meet my neighbor's friend or something, and then 6 months later they'll be like, "Oh, did you write Prep? Like I read that," or something. So it's like they almost, you know my book but don't know me or something. And I'm actually like, that's perfect. Thank you.
I'm shocked actually that would only happen to you 3 times a year. But I don't know. For me, I've read your books since I started reading you. It's been almost 20 years of reading you, you know, and you don't know the people you're reading, but in your head, you're like, oh, well, yeah, Curtis Sittenfeld, here's another book, of course, you know.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Really and truly, I think that, and it took a while for this to happen. I think that that's like the nicest part of being a writer, where I've now, because my first book came out 18 years ago, I now will have people who will be like, I read Prep in college. And then, you know, maybe I read like Sisterland when I was in labor or something. And then I read Eligible when my mom was in the hospital or whatever. And it's so touching to feel like, oh my God, we've grown up together, you know, or like people who read Prep at the age of, 13 are now like these awesome, like it'll be like a human rights lawyer or like a social worker or something like, so it feels like this incredible kind of privilege to go through life with people over a period of years, even though we don't necessarily know each other directly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Really awesome. Are there writers that you really admire, or somebody who like me too, reading you for almost 20 years, you're like, oh, whatever this person puts out, like I'll read this next?
Well, my favorite writer since high school has been Alice Munro. And I also like, I don't reread very much, including, honestly, I don't reread that much of her or like that often, but I do sometimes reread one of her stories. And now like if she was writing about women in their 40s and I read it when I was 19, I do feel like now I'll think like, oh my God. And I thought it was insightful then, but now I'm blown away. And then, is this book on your radar? I just read this book and I was like, holy shit, this person is such a genius. Okay, so her name is, I don't know how to pronounce her name. I need to learn. It's Cecilia Rabus or Rabus or Rabus, Rabess.
Is it called Everything's Fine? Or is
Fine.
it called
Have you? Yes.
I have it. I haven't read it yet. I'm
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. And do you know what it's about?
I did at one point because I looked at it and I was like, I have to interview her, but now I can't remember.
Yeah, you have to interview her. So it's a first novel. It's about a Black woman and a white man who went to college together and then worked together at Goldman Sachs and become close, which you could interpret as you wish. And he's politically conservative. She's like much more progressive. It starts in, I think, 2008 and goes to like 2016. It is so good. And the woman, Cecilia Rabus, or I'll find out after this how to pronounce her name, but worked in real life at Goldman Sachs and now works at Google. And I was like, how can someone be so good at so many things? Like if you were like, I'll pay you $5 million, I don't think I could work at Goldman. I wouldn't be capable, or like, work at Google. I don't think I could do anything besides, I could write email. I could do predictive. I could be someone else's like predictive, whatever autofill. So that book is coming out in June. I give it like an A++. Like it was one of those books where I kind of felt like emotionally worked up even when I wasn't reading it, which is like, wow. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Oh that's rare.
I'm going to like bump it up the queue now.
After
Did you tell her how much you love it?
Yeah. So it's so funny because tweeted, like I looked her up. I'm not on Instagram, but I'm on Twitter. And I looked her up and didn't find her on Twitter. And then I just like tweeted about, and the other thing was, I swear that the book, I mean, I'm sure that you're like, books are like pouring down in your head. Like I think that I got the book without a letter. Like it was like from the heavens or something. And I kind of impulsively took it on a plane. And I was, because, like, and sometimes when you do that, you like it, sometimes you don't. And then I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so I tweeted about liking it. And then she reached out to me, but it was also kind of fun to know nothing about her except like this tiny bio on the back, and then be like, oh my God, like, yeah. It's so exciting especially when there's this voice that you sort of fall in love with, and then you're like, oh, like, and this person, this is the beginning.
Yes. That's the best feeling when you can't put it down. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's really exciting. I will dig into that. I will ignore this stack here.
I know. I mean, there's always actually, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, this is not a post.
Oh my gosh. How did you get Hedge? How did you even get that?
I did an event with Jane a couple of years ago, and she sent it, and I think it sounds excellent. I have not read it, but it's mine. I know.
That's so exciting. I feel like I just saw like my favorite stuffed animal on your bed or something.
It's like your little gnome, like in Paris or whatever. I know. I'm super excited. I think I really liked when I hadn't met Jane and before we did the event together, but she was lovely, and I was so happy to get the book.
Oh, it's good. It's really good. I hope you love it.
I hope. I'm planning to.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I could talk to you all day, but I better end the episode. But thank you so much. This is so much fun.
My pleasure. Next time I'll wear my we'll match.
We'll coordinate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the time and everything.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.